I was coming to freedom, and what I thought was going to be a dream actually became a nightmare for me.
He's a phenomenal human being. To see him crippled to a point of being afraid to leave the house.
Not wanting your accent to be heard, right? So there's just a constant state of fear.
The scenario of the bird is in the cage, the door is open, the bird doesn't come out because it's been in the cage so long. I spent the last 28 years without citizenship, and if anybody has ever lived that journey, they know what that is. They know the cost and the price and the burden that comes with that.
This is Birds.Bees.Bodies, the podcast where we strip away the myths and get real about sexual and reproductive health. No shame, no stigma, just truth, guidance, and conversations that matter. Powered by Planned Parenthood of Florida, we're here to break barriers, challenge the silence, and give you the knowledge to take charge of your health and your future. Let's go. Welcome everyone to another episode of Birds.Bees.Bodies, brought to you by Planned Parenthood of Florida. I'm so happy to be back in this season 4 of Birds.Bees.Bodies. It's incredible how we have been able to take so many conversations and bring them to you, whether you're in your car driving, whether you're at home, whether you're hanging out on the couch. These are important topics that we're talking about, well-being, healthcare, mental health, and all things in between as it relates to what we do at Planned Parenthood. And so today I am extremely excited to welcome a few of our guests for this very important topic that we are discussing today about mental health and immigration. Mental Health Without Borders is the name of this episode. As always, I'm your host, Michelle Casada. I'm the Vice President of Communications for Planned Parenthood of Florida. And with me is Janet Santiago, our Behavioral Health Program Director. Welcome back, Janet, to another podcast.
Thank you for having me. It's always a pleasure to join.
Thank you. And always great to discuss these really important topics. And today we have Stevan and Portia joining us as well to talk about their story and give us a little insight to how important mental health is as we navigate what's going on with immigration across the world. And right here in the U.S., we know immigration is in flux. We've had major plant raids. We've had sweeping visa rule changes. Many lives are in the balance. Behind every policy shift, we know there is a human story. And people are navigating fear, they're navigating uncertainty, they're navigating their identity. So today we really are going to focus in on some of those consequences, and the most hidden one is mental health. So I appreciate everyone for joining in. I'd like to just start off with doing an introduction. Janet, if you want to start and just share a little bit about your background as Behavioral Health Program Director for Planned Parenthood of Florida, and then we'd love to hear from our guests and their story and why they're here.
So again, my name is Janet. I'm the Behavioral Health Program Director at Planned Parenthood of Florida. I oversee a fully virtual statewide program that provides therapy, support groups, and resource navigation for people across Florida. Our goal is to make mental health care accessible, trauma-informed, and inclusive, especially for communities that often face barriers, including immigrants, LGBTQ individuals, and people without insurance.
Thank you for having me. My name is Stevan. Well, just to share a little bit about myself, I'm originally from the Turks and Caicos Islands. Um, I'm currently I'm a community organizer with a nonpartisan organization that works along with immigration and other folks that are impacted by many of our current laws. And it's a privilege to be a part of this podcast today.
Thank you for having us. It is definitely a pleasure and an honor. Once again, my name is Portia. I'm originally from Columbus, Ohio, and I work in the mental health field. I work in inpatient.
Wonderful. Thank you, Portia. And so I wanted to start off just by giving a little level set of Planned Parenthood and what's been happening with immigration. You know, we have had shared a lot of reassurance with our patients that our health centers are welcoming for all. They do not ask, our health center staff never ask for documentation status on immigration status anything like that in our health centers. That's not a requirement to receive care. And so I wanted to mention that because there are a lot of folks that are living in a very difficult space right now with immigration and just what's happening across the country, what we've seen here in our own state of Florida. Stevan and Portia, like, would you be able to share a little bit about your personal story and any struggles that you have dealt with, physically, emotionally, mentally, as we navigate this topic?
I was born and raised in the Turks and Caicos Islands, and just to paint a picture for you, if you've ever been to the islands, Turks and Caicos, um, you know that it's known for its beautiful beaches, beautiful sand, beautiful turquoise water. It's known for peace and tranquility. That's how we identify, as peace and tranquility. So that's how I grew up. Um, Everything at my back and call, all my leaders I saw were people that looked like me. Um, there were no issues in terms of, as far as I could tell. I went to school and that's all I worried about. At age 19, I made the transition to Florida just in pursuit of education and having my hopes up and my pursuing my dreams. But what I thought I was coming to freedom and what I thought was going to be a dream actually became a nightmare for me because not knowing um, the requirements or not knowing the system. Whereas I was in a country where I was free and had the liberty to move as I wanted to, I came into a country where I was no longer a citizen, and so so I became somewhat of a prisoner to the system, and I spent the last and just to make story short, we can talk details later, but I spent the last 28 years without citizenship. And if anybody has ever lived that journey, they know what that is. They know the cost and the price and the burden that comes with that. And today, if opportunities present itself, I would love to share some of the impact of how living in the shadows and living in fear and living in a state of hypervigilance all the time. The damage that it actually does to you. And you said it when you opened it. You said, Michelle, you said, behind every policy, behind every law, the work that I do would be we work around those things. We go to Tallahassee and we advocate for laws and stuff that impact certain communities. And so I have not only fought for those laws, but I've been a victim of those laws. And so it is. I want to share that from a transparent state of mind that behind those laws and behind these decisions, behind certain narratives, there is somebody, some family, some child um, who suffer the consequences of it.
Thank you so much for sharing, Stevan. And I wanted to touch on something that you said because I think a lot of people when they're not familiar with the immigration issues and the immigration system in our country, they think, well, how difficult can it be? Like, apply for your paperwork and do this and do that, and they don't realize the challenges and the hurdles and the barriers and the wait time, and then you have to start the paperwork all over again and all these things that happen, right? Because there's expiration points for each phase of becoming a citizen and getting to the point of even establishing residency in this country. And people don't know that. So can you share like mentally what that process does to you, like the impacts of how you feel, how you approach the world, knowing that even if you are doing everything right, you're at the mercy of, an unknown process.
And one of the things that happens is, people don't understand immigrants live, especially undocumented immigrants. We, as I said, we live in the shadows. We have to live in constant fear. You live with, as someone who cannot work, cannot accumulate or save enough money to file your paperwork. And this is my experience. I'm not. This is my real story. Um, I think I filed every 5 years because that's how long it took me to save enough money to try to get a lawyer or try to do it myself. You have to pay for the paperwork. Each paperwork has each paper it comes with a fee. So only for lawyers to stiff you, to take your money and don't do the work, and you repeat this cycle over and over. There's a constant. Can I trust this person? Can I? Am I going to get is it going to work this time? I remember back in 2017 when my wife and I filed, we did it ourselves just on faith, but we didn't understand the system. We didn't understand the paperwork. We didn't understand, terminologies, and for that reason, we missed some important things, right? And and my paperwork was rejected. That sent me into hiding. And when I talk about hiding, I mean not wanting to be seen, not wanting to speak because I didn't want people to hear my voice or to hear an accent. Um, I surrendered my identity. I surrendered my desire to even be heard. And if you've lived as an immigrant, you know what I'm talking about. When you have to, this is your safety. This is your defense mechanism where you have to protect yourself by surrendering your voice. Um, that is one of the effects, and there are physical effects. If you don't mind me sharing, there are physical effects that took place around that same time for me too in 2017. If you just think really hard, you would know what was going on around 2017. And I remember waking up and I was having nosebleeds every morning, and I just didn't understand. Growing up where I was taught to be tough and taught to be a man, and I didn't I didn't acknowledge when there was pain. And so now I'm in this country over 20 something years now, and I'm feeling and experiencing these things, but I'm not addressing it because to me it's just a normal day. I don't have the time to sit around and feel sorry for myself about my nose bleeding every day. Well, I went to a healthcare workshop, I think like a few weeks after, and my wife was with me, and she kept pushing me to go and get my blood pressure checked. And eventually I did. I didn't want to, but I did. And my blood pressure was well over 200, top number. The nurse said to me, "Well, I don't even understand how you're standing here. I don't understand how you're walking around. You need to go to the hospital immediately." And that was the first time that I ever heard the word anxiety. And I was told that I was stressed out. And I didn't understand the magnitude of it. I just knew that I was worried constantly, waking up with heart palpitations and not being able to sleep well, and all constantly feeling like I was being hunted down. Even though that may have been not naturally be the case, it's just that what was going on in my own brain, in my own mind. Um, yes, yeah, and my brain, I think, at some point kind of shut down to protect me. That's when I really developed anxiety, where it literally lived in my body. It wasn't even a thought anymore. If you have a thought about fear, you can probably think on something else or focus somewhere else and get over it. But this became a 24/7 thing where it won't go away. My wife would say to me, "I don't know how to help you." She would see me in this state, and I had no more control over my nervous system, over my body, over uh, when it came on me. Uh, Janet can tell you this, and she may not even realize this, but when we went to Puerto Rico last year, I went up. We went up into on a hill on the beach, and I took my son up there. I wanted to show him the other side of the ocean, and I got paralyzed. I got paralyzed by fear. I was just living in a state where I just live in great anxiety. It was just I didn't understand the diagnosis yet because I hadn't been diagnosed yet. I just knew that something was happening that I didn't understood. I understood that it was the result of me living in this state for so long. So,
And
so you,
Portia, anything you can add about, I mean, seeing Stefan go through this, like how what did that do to your own mental health?
Yeah, it was extremely hard. I've been working in mental health probably for the last decade, outpatient, inpatient. And so I know the benefits of therapy and just life, how life can just throw you so many things. And so seeking that help is important. As someone who was born a US citizen, I I just I thought I understood when I first met him. He explained to me that he was, where he was from and that he was not a citizen. And I really didn't think it was a big deal. I really didn't. And it wasn't until we got married and then we started our life together and I saw how limited he was and how he couldn't do the things that I think U.S. citizens, it's just simple to us: getting a driver's license, buying a car, getting a job, having health care. Anything that requires, whether it's a social security number or a checking account, just those basic things he didn't have access to. And so I didn't understand his fight until we got married, and I realized, wow, this is hard. This is hard as a man who's married, who now has a family. He can't get a job. He can't drive a car. He can't fly. I think another thing, he lost a lot of family members, not being able to go home and see his parents for over 20 years. How hard that has been. And so, as the wife of an undocumented immigrant, I don't really know if I have all the words to be able to articulate, to see him struggling day by day, to see and to know and to try to help, but I can't, because I don't know what to do. I don't know where to go. And so it's been difficult, to see someone you love just struggle day to day, and to see someone who is a great man, who is strong, and he's dependable, and he's just he's a phenomenal human being, to see him crippled to a point of being afraid to leave the house, being afraid to be seen, to be on social media, to be out in public, because his fear and anxiety has been so real. So it has been difficult. It really has been. It's been difficult, but he has always, even in that fear, he has always he's always been encouraging, even I think to me. And when I did not know what to do for him, he was able to encourage himself. And so that has been, I think, the hardest thing for me as a wife, when you see someone that you love so much, um, not being able to live their life fully, not being free, and just the freedoms that I take for granted, I think, as a U.S. citizen. Um, yeah, I don't know, it's very hard. It really is. But um, he has always, and there were times when I would ask him, like, do you ever think about just going home? And he would tell me, my family is here, my wife is here, my children are here, this is my home. And so, and that's where he has remained.
That's so incredible. And to think that you all have gone through that trauma for so long, and overcome, so much, and been resilient. Janet, can you talk a little bit about, the fact that going through this alone is traumatic enough, but then there's the barriers to even getting, like, it's not that you can just, one, acknowledge what's happening to you, right? Like, there's like this chronic thing going on that you don't really know where it's coming from until you realize where it's coming from. And two, the barriers to getting care when you're already dealing with a situation as an undocumented person.
There's tons of barriers, right? Has been mentioned, the fear, right? The fear of disclosing your status because you don't know what's going to happen, or not even just disclosing your status. Stefan, you even made the comment of not wanting your accent to be heard, right? So there's just a constant state of fear. Language barriers, right? So if I don't speak the same language, how do I know who to ask, right? Or even if I am able to ask someone, usually the paperwork is handed to you in English or Spanish. Well, what if you don't speak one of those two languages, right? So the language barriers that may show up, not having insurance, right, for healthcare or for anything else, really, and just honestly, limited culturally competent providers is a big barrier as well, especially in the mental health care field, right? So there's people that come from cultures where therapy is seen as a luxury or taboo, and it's just not seen as something that we can do, right? So that's why a lot of times there's a lack of information about what anxiety looks like, what depression looks like, that kind of thing. A lot of people think depression is feeling sad all the time. Really, it's feeling empty. It's a lack of emotion. It's apathy, right? So there's a lot of barriers to getting the care that people need, whether it's language, finances, transportation, right? just limited access. If you live in a rural area and you don't have those services around you, there's just barrier after barrier for people to seek out mental health care. Which is why here at Planned Parenthood, we try really hard to make sure that our virtual services, our mental health care, are currently virtual, and that we can provide services to any Floridian, no matter where they are, as long as they have a Wi-Fi signal.
And there's two important things that you mentioned in your story, Stevan, that I wanted to make sure we addressed. One was the physical illness that came out of that mental stress that you were constantly facing, which I want Janet to touch on that. Like, because sometimes we go through moments of stress and anxiety, and we, again, like you mentioned, we can change our mind, change our perspective, go take a walk and try to take our mind off of it. But you shut that part down in you, and it started to show up in other places. Is that something that's really common, Janet, when someone is under this constant, state of like fight or flight?
We have to remember that, our mind is separate from our brain. Our brain is all chemicals and connections, right? Wiring and all these electrical connections that are going through, and it takes maintenance, right? So when we have a lot of anxiety and depression, typically it's because you have a lot of cortisol in your system. And it takes things like exercise and eating right or talking or, getting back out into nature and just like standing in the grass barefoot and putting your hands in the soil, right? Just to kind of feel a reconnection. It takes a lot to really maintain our mental health because it's not just what you think. It's about the way that your brain is functioning. It's about the energy throughout your body. There's a lot tied to our mental health. So absolutely, you're going to see it in physical symptoms. Our brain, our subconscious is wired to force us to address the things that we have to address. So if you are not going to address it consciously, it's going to show up physically. It's going to show up in your nightmares. Typically, people that are not dealing with whatever stressors they're having tend to report that they wake up between the hours of 2 to 4 in the morning. A lot of times I hear that a lot. Now, don't quote me on that. That's not a statistic. I'm just telling you from my experience. Typically, what I've seen from 2 to 4 a.m., we're waking up because our brain is trying to force us to process things and we're blocking it. So it's showing up in so many different other ways. That's why it's so important to process it. And processing can be anything. It could be journaling, it could be talking. And you don't actually have to talk to anyone. I love to hit record on my phone and just start rambling. It could be art. It could be in any way that you can get whatever's in you out. It has to happen in order for your body and your mind to really come into full sync and for there to be a balance.
And then there's the other barrier that Esteban mentioned, which I don't know if you realized you were saying it while you were talking about it, but it was stigma. Because I heard you say something about how you're raised to be a man and you're raised to take care of your family and provide for your family and all these things. And that's one of the main barriers that most men face in seeking help or getting care. It's that, no, I can handle it. I'm strong enough. I can handle it. And it's one of those things that, I'm very familiar with the Hispanic immigrant community, being Latina myself. And I know that growing up, the men in my family were raised to believe that you don't need mental health. You just need to get outside and like start chopping down trees and work on the yard. And like, that's your mental health. You know what I mean? So like, let's talk about that because there's a huge population of different, immigrant backgrounds in our country that are dealing with similar stereotypes and similar stigma when it comes to mental health care.
Absolutely. For the longest time, especially in BIPOC communities and Hispanic communities, mental health is seen as a luxury. You have to keep in mind we've been in survival for how many years? Over 400 years. We've been in survival mode, right? So we have trained ourselves and programmed ourselves to believe that I don't have time to deal with mental health because I have to deal with survival, which is why I laughed when you said, Michelle, about going outside to work on trees. In my family, it's the same way, right? If you have time to stress, that just means you need a third job. You have time to work, right? So that that belief really comes from generations of people that didn't have the support and the care that they needed, right? That they were met with more harshness when they were soft, right? They were told they were weak instead of strong for being able to express what was going on. And there was a lot of mixed messages and unrealistic expectations, right? The expectation that men are not supposed to cry. Men are human. They have the same tear ducts that women have, right? So There's a lot of core beliefs and values that we developed in childhood that carry on into adulthood that no longer serve us, and honestly only serve to keep the anxiety and depression going.
What was that like for you? Because I mean, your wife's work is mental health. So like, did you shy away from it? Did she recognize what was happening before you did? I mean,
Um, I was aware because of her work that she does, and because of the people that she has met, and I have also met. Um, I was always an advocate for therapy and mental wellness. The one thing I do know, growing up with a lot of men around me, being manly men, and all the stereotypes in the black community, we were raised with the same thing. But I knew to be honest with myself that I was not okay, and I knew I wasn't okay because I'm used to I always kind of pride myself on being strong and being the one that encourages everyone. I'm always that person, but I find myself not having the energy, not having the strength, not having the mental capacity to carry anybody. Um, and I had to deal with the fact that getting help so that I could be strong for my wife and strong for my sons was not a sign of weakness, but it was probably one of my greatest strengths to be able to acknowledge that I needed help. And it was only then when I started going to therapy, that I recognized what was actually happening. I could put a name to everything that was happening. Uh, I realized that I was being a fool in many cases because a lot of things that I just ignored and just buried and carried, I should not have done that, which contributed to the state of mind that I was in. I always had this mindset of trying to be everything to everyone, and I had to learn that I had to make time for me to be well, make time for me to heal. And so uh, that's what I that's what I had to do in terms of, and I had to defy what I was taught growing up in my culture. I had to defy that. I was a little I was a little afraid to tell my parents that I was in therapy for a long time because we saw that as weakness. But I had to do it for myself, and there's no regrets. Um, and I'm still in therapy, so so I encourage anyone that if you're unsure, you're struggling with emotionally and mentally, and you're not feeling yourself, there's nothing wrong with getting not just a second opinion, but getting someone who has an unbiased opinion to really walk you through the process.
and Portia, I know you talked about the impact of family that this had, which we didn't really get into much, but like just the different facets of impact to family, what this immigration process does to families and the identity. You talked about all the things that Stevan wanted to do that had barriers and limitations to doing them. I can't even imagine starting to think about family vacations. Like even that, I'm sure was stressful to even think about traveling even within the state or within the area. Like that was stressful. So there's a lot there, but I know we're getting close to time, and I want to say that Stefan, you've become a citizen. Congratulations! Like this is incredible news that after all of this, stress
Right.
and agony and starting and stopping and all of this, you were able to achieve that, which is such an incredible milestone and something that so many people in this country are hoping that they can achieve someday as well. Talk about like what comes next. There's still a lot of healing going on from this process. There was years, decades of
Yes.
so much trauma built up. What does the healing look like for you now?
It's the syndrome of the scenario of the bird is in the cage, the door is open, the bird doesn't come out because it's been in the cage so long. There's, I guess, this shock. I guess it's unbelief. I guess it's a lot of things where I am not really sure how to feel. I'm not sure. My wife would tell you just this morning. So the tears come often because the belief that I got through this, that I made it after 28 years, that I am free from that is still is not only unbelievable, but I think my brain has not yet processed it. But there's a lot of things I have that therapy has helped me to understand, work through what do I want to do, who am I, You know, I've been identified as an immigrant or undocumented immigrant all these years, but who am I really, and what do I really want to do? So that's what's next for me. I'm looking at what's next. I mean, I just published a book, but there's more that I want to do. Right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, congratulations. I'm so happy for you both after dealing with such an awful position to be in, and not for a lack of trying. It's
Right.
just because this is what real families face every single day, in our country and across the world, frankly. Janet, is there anything else you'd want to add to on healing and resilience, and especially asking for help?
What I'd like to add is that, healing is possible. No matter your circumstances, no matter your background or, what you were taught when you were a kid, healing is possible and everyone deserves it, right? No one has to go through it alone. It's not an easy process. It takes courage, right? But I can't think of a single immigrant that I've ever met that doesn't have the courage, right? They've made it here and they've made it this long. Courage is something that they all carry. So I think that it's important to find your connections, your community, your people that can support you, whether that's therapy or it's your local church or community center or somewhere where you feel welcome, connected, and loved. That's going to be the first start to healing.
Stefan, what advice would you give someone else who's currently going through the situation that you went through, for 20 plus years, 28 years?
I would have to say, hold on to your faith, hold on to hope. Under no circumstances, give that up. That was all I really had, to be honest with you. um, as we continue to advocate for a clearer path to citizenship for everybody else, um, just hold on to the people around you, because I always long for a sense of belonging. That was always an issue because I came here by myself without any family members. So hold on to that, and just have faith. That's all I can say. Really, is have faith. There's really no other answer that I can give. Just have faith and trust God.
Yeah. And become aware. Like, people need to be aware of the policies that impact people's lives and impact the immigration system. Become an advocate. Learn what the laws are, learn what's happening. There's so many things happening even in our own communities right now with ICE. And people need to be aware, like knowledge is power. If you're able to get involved, like, please do get involved. This is really important things that are touching so many lives right now, and we can't even begin to grasp what this does generationally to families, and like the work that you're doing now to heal from this process. I do want to highlight our incredible behavioral health program, because it goes without saying, Janet runs a program where we do have culturally competent providers, licensed clinicians, and providers who really work to relate to you and what's happening, in your life. They're trauma informed. We have trauma therapy. Janet, if you wanted to share a little bit about your program and like how we're able to help in a situation like what Sivan has been in.
Our behavioral health program, as I said earlier, is statewide. So we service all Floridians ages 13 to 65 who are experiencing mild to moderate mental health symptoms such as depression, anxiety, grief, trauma, so on and so forth. We do accept most major insurances, as well as keep our self pay rate low, but we try to offer pro bono services through some grant funds when we have them available and through master's level clinical interns as well. So we try to make sure that we can reach everyone where they are. We are currently fully virtual. We are working on being in person at some point in the next year, hopefully, so we can come to you. We provide individual and group therapy, as well as a specialty treatment called eye movement desensitization and reprocessing, EMDR, which uses bilateral stimulation to heal the effects of trauma on the brain. We have clinicians all over the state, bilingual clinicians as well, and they're all trained and ready to help.
Thank you so much. And if you want to learn more about us and the mental health care we offer, please go to ppfl.org. You can also follow us on social media at PP Florida. We're in almost all of the platforms. So thank you so much. Thank you, Portia and Stevan, for being with
Thank
us
you for
today,
having us.
for being brave to share your story, and the courage that it took, to go through this whole process and never give up. I mean, I think if there's anything you should be very proud of, it's not only achieving this incredible milestone, but it's like you're still standing, like this is a lot for anyone. Thank you both so much. I appreciate your time here.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us.